When it comes to peer pressure and the values we live by, one of the greatest temptations that comes into play is sexual temptation and investing in relationships that are not healthy. Now, Solomon also had a lot to say about unhealthy relationships. If you know anything about Solomon, he had actually several hundred wives. And so he knew a lot about bad relationships. And so he wrote about some advice. Now, in chapter 6 of Proverbs, he's talking about talking about sexual purity and actually talking about living a life that is not sexually pure. And in that process, this is what he writes: "Can you build a fire in your lap and not burn your pants? Can you walk barefoot on hot coals and not get blisters?" When it comes to sexual temptation, I believe Solomon's summary would basically be, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. When it comes to dating relationships and marriage, Pastor Alex, is there any advice that you would have for the graduates at this point in their life?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's good advice. No, it is. So, maybe it's not. I don't know. It's a bit debatable. But no, I think this is one of the biggest decisions you will ever make in your life. The decision of who you will marry or who you won't marry, or if you will get married at all. I think it's the biggest decision. It's the blessing that God has given to you to join with another person and go and change this world together. I mean, that's the calling. When we do weddings, there's a line in there: what will you do to impact God's kingdom? And so it's a huge deal. And so it's a big decision for you guys to be making, and it's a decision that happens generally in the next decade of your lives. And so it's a really big thing. And so in my life, it was something that I really held important. And I remember, and probably some of you even had the same advice from maybe your folks as well, your parents. And I remember my parents just always saying, just marry your best friend. And as simple as that sounds, that's hard, because you got to evaluate what you really want from a best friend. What makes up that best friend, and then you have to find that. And that's the case. Who do you want to, be okay sitting around in sweats with on a lazy Sunday afternoon? Who do you want to go out and go on vacation with for 2 weeks with screaming kids in the back of your car? I mean, but those are big things that at this stage you need to be thinking about in those relationships that you're in. And that's something that I've always held true, and luckily enough that worked out for me. I'm grateful. I wouldn't have gotten married if Krista wasn't my best friend. And so that was a good piece of advice. The other piece of advice, and I remember my friend saying this when we first went to college, is that everything changes. And for me, everything did change because girls didn't like me in high school. But anyway, in college, I remember him saying, I remember my friend was dating an individual, or not dating. He was just like always talking to her. I'm like, well, why aren't you dating? And I was giving him a hard time. He's like, because I don't know if I could marry her. And I thought that was a pretty bold thing to say. Pretty bold thing in viewing dating, because you guys are entering into a stage of life where is it really worth just dating? If you see no potential end of this relationship that's going to be good. And so that brought a whole new dimension to it. And I think a lot of that is, it's not putting more pressure into the dating. It just means don't get into a relationship if it's just a silly, frivolous relationship. Let it have meaning. Let it have potential there. And I think that's an important thing to do. And for me, I had 2 goals going into college, and none of them were academic. And the first goal was to be in a band, and clearly that worked out for me. I mean, I got to play, but obviously I'm a rock star now. Anyway, but the second one was to find the person I was going to marry, and so that worked out for me. And it was a month after we graduated that we got married. So that was when I got married. Now you've been married for almost
been married for 18 years. But the thing is, when I was your age, I'd been married for 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. I was 29 before I got married. I was almost 30. And, at the time, it seemed like everyone else was married, and I was the only one that hadn't gotten married from high school. Actually, what I also realized was that when I got married, I had friends from high school that were already on their third marriage and had kids in middle school. So I was very much in a different place. And even though I had some classmates at 11 years out of school that had multiple marriages, I doubt that that's as much the case for your classmates, but they've probably been through even more broken relationships in that period of time. But as I look back on that stage of my life, feeling like, am I ever going to get married? Am I ever going to find anyone? For those of you that are single, let me encourage you, don't compromise your standards. Don't lower your standards. I decided that I was willing to stay single the rest of my life as opposed to compromising my standards and who it is that I believe God had called me to be and who I believe God had called my wife to be. And in that process, one of the things that really challenged me in college was at an InterVarsity Christian Fellowship retreat, and the speaker said that reminded us of Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount that said, "Seek first the kingdom of heaven and God's righteousness, and all these things, even marriage, will be added unto you." And so whenever I was tempted to compromise, to change my values just for the sake of being able to get married, I was always reminded that my first priority was to seek God and His kingdom, and then the rest of life would fall into order.